Hi everyone, my name is Margaret Ransdell-Green, and today I'll be talking about how to distill theoretical work into something that could become a community language project. Specifically, I'll be talking about my project called the Kala Sound Project. So the overview of this presentation, first I'll talk about the background of the Kala language and some of the documentation work that's been done previously. Then I'll discuss some of the goals that I have for the Kala Sound Project and some of the guidelines that I followed, some of the things that I wanted before I started the project. Next, I will discuss some of the major challenges and limitations of the project as it currently is, and then move on to talk about future potentials for how to make the project better, how it could possibly be something more. So, background on the Kala language. This is a Western Oceanic language spoken by around 3,000 speakers in Morobe province in Papua New Guinea, right up along the Huon Gulf across 6 different villages and 4 dialects. So you have 3 northern villages and 3 southern villages. This language is undergoing shift to Tok Pisin, which is a lingua franca or regional language of Papua New Guinea. So it is considered an endangered language. This is an illustration drawn by a community member in Menindala of the 6 Kala villages. So on the far left, you see Menindala, which is actually the northernmost village, followed by Lambu, Apose, Kamiali, Areso, and Kui. Kamiali, Areso, and Kui speak the southern dialect with some minor differences between all 3 of them. And the 3 northern villages each have their own dialect. So far, much of the linguistic work that I've been involved with has been as a part of an interdisciplinary team. I began work in 2017 with my colleagues Christine Schreier, a linguistic anthropologist, John Wagner, an environmental anthropologist, and Ken Longenecker, who's a marine biologist. And all of the research that we've been involved with so far has been community-based research alongside the Kala Language Committee, which is a committee with members from all of the villages who are involved with language matters for Kala villages. In 2010, there was orthography development with the community. The first dictionary came out in 2013, and currently we're involved in a multi-year project that started in 2017 involving another larger dictionary, a grammar sketch for pedagogical use in the villages, as well as an aquatic environmental encyclopedia. So some of the goals of the Kala Sound Project. In December 2022, I completed a dissertation on Kala phonology, which was the first detailed phonological description of all the dialects. Also included acoustic studies on 3 dynamic sound processes that happen with vowels in Southern Kala, and also involved a typological survey of regional languages around Kala. I had a goal before beginning my dissertation to work after the dissertation was over to find a way to distill some of the most essential knowledge from that dissertation into a more accessible, relevant, and potentially interesting format. This would be for the use of anyone online, including community members, speakers, learners, or really any other kind of non-linguist who had interest in this topic. I wanted to bring information out of the dissertation and into another kind of modality of communication with the goal of increased accessibility and relevance. So I decided to do this in the format of a website. In creating this website, I wanted the focus to be Kala, phonetics, and phonology, but in a way that was focused on listening to the actual sounds of the language and less so me talking and writing about the sounds, although there is some of that too. I wanted there to be a way to hear Kala in an online format that was easily accessible. I wanted to have audio clips to illustrate every single phoneme in the phoneme inventory, as well as allophones, phonetic processes, basically all of the Kala knowledge or information that appears in my dissertation I wanted to have on this website in some form. I started with an understanding that making research material accessible requires a departure from more traditional formats like the dissertation, with the belief that linguistic justice can't take place with knowledge wrapped up in an arcane tome. And I think the dissertation is kind of the ultimate arcane tome in this context. So I wanted to move away from that into something a little more open. So some of the guidelines I started with when I wanted to make this website was that I wanted to have an audio clip to illustrate everything. I wanted to have the speaker's voice available to be heard, to show these processes that were happening, to show how these sounds really appear in the language. And moreover, I wanted that to reflect what I had done in my dissertation. I also discussed a little bit on the website information about the Kala alphabet, which I thought might be useful since it is relatively new, and some information about how that alphabet represents the sounds that we're hearing in these audio clips. I wanted to use as little jargon as possible in order to avoid any kind of obfuscation whatsoever. I also have a goal to offer the website in both English and Tok Pisin, since most of the Kala speakers, when they speak another language, it's almost certainly going to be Tok Pisin, although a few of them speak English. I wanted this to be linguistically accessible to the widest number of people from that community. So for now, all the audio clips are the speech of a single Southern Kala speaker who lives in Port Moresby. I'll talk a little bit more about why that is later. All audio material is open access archived in Kaipuleohone, which is the language archive at UH Manoa. Full permissions and input from the speaker have been used in regard to all the files used in this web building project. And anything that happens in the future, if there are other speakers or other files or other information, will all go through her to gain her full consent for all of that. The first focus of the website is phonemes and their allophones. I do make brief descriptions of the sound system, as well as some of how the alphabet is used for Kala, but the focus is really on the audio itself and the ability to listen to spoken Kala as spoken by a native speaker. I use both individual words and natural multi-word phrases. So here I have anda sorome, which means very good, which is a phrase, but then other examples just use single words like adi, father. Examples of phonemes in as many word positions as possible was something that was also important to me. So notwithstanding the phonotactic restrictions of Kala, I wanted to have every sound in as many possible word positions, so initial, medial, final, if possible. And I also used a mix of what are more common and less common words too. The second focus of the website is sound changes and dynamic processes in the phonetics. So the three vowel processes that I looked at in my dissertation were vowel deletion, vowel laxing, and different types of nasality in vowels. So I wanted to find a way to distill the information and the knowledge that I gained when I did this dissertation in a way that is not completely confusing. So I wanted to basically translate these into plain language descriptions of the processes that might be potentially familiar to somebody who does speak Kala, because some speakers are aware of some of these differences in these processes that are happening in the language. So I wanted the language I used to describe these to reflect that sort of basic facts of it. I used audio clips to illustrate each process. And another thing that was important to me is that I wanted to show how some of these processes are actually optional in the language. So I wanted to include counterexamples as well. So for example, one of the sound changes that I describe on the website is vowel deletion. So I described this in more or less, hopefully jargon-free words, and illustrate with sound clips how this can happen in words, phrases, basically just give a lot of different examples of the same thing occurring so that it's basically sufficiently illustrated and hopefully more accessible to somebody who might be familiar with those words in particular. Some of the challenges and limitations of this project so far, the first challenge is the limit of speakers. So before I had stated that there was only one speaker who's represented in the audio clips of this website. That's for a specific reason. And that reason is that even though we've done a lot of community-based research with lots of different people from all the villages, it's very hard for me right now to communicate with anybody back in the villages. And that lack of long-distance communication makes things really difficult, both to gain any kind of permission or consent from speakers to use their voices in this project, because when they consented to participate in research, it was not with this specific project in mind. So I can't and won't use their voices without their permission for this, of course. So currently, all the audio clips are from Hega Jagapa, who lives in Port Moresby. She speaks a Southern Kala dialect from Areso, but I was able to work with her in 2019, and I made a lot of audio recordings with her then. And I have contact with her and her husband by email. So because they live in Port Moresby and have email, it makes long distance communication a lot easier. So I could work out floating ideas by her, getting her permission to use her voice in different ways, making sure she was okay with things, what she thought about it. But in the future, potentially, more dialects, villages, and speakers could be represented if people were on board with the idea. Similarly, another major problem is also induced by limited contact, is that I have limited feedback. Because I can't communicate right now with most of the community members in the villages, I can't get input from those people. So ideally, I would like to be able to show people back in the villages what I've been working on, to see how I could make changes to make it more interesting, if they had any ideas about it, or if potentially they wanted to have their voices used in some way, I could gain that type of permission. So technological challenges of internet access in the village and cell access make it really difficult to get input, basically. So limited contact means limited everything, basically, right now. Another issue is that right now I don't have any corpus of Kala. So I have a lot of recordings, but not all of them are fully transcribed in the way that I would need to create a corpus. So it makes it difficult when I'm searching for a particular word to illustrate something on the website. One of my goals for the next year is to complete transcriptions of all this material of Hega's voice so that I can access like any word, and I can have like maybe narratives or sentences, something fuller and better on the website. So the future of the project, I think, basically is expansion and fine-tuning. Potentially, I would like to be able to contact more speakers, possible addition of more people's voices if they were okay with it, input from community members, feedback, everything like that. I would like to have more sample words for every phoneme, allophone, process, etc. I'd also like to have audio clips of fuller sentences, narratives. I would like for the language to be able to showcase the sounds of the language, but also have a broader, fuller context of what the speaker was talking about, rather than just have like little clipped phrases and words, which is not normally how you hear language in the wild. So that is something that is one of my goals, is to kind of move toward longer form audio clips so that when listening to the language, it might feel more normal rather than just hearing like a word. I'd also, in the future, if possible, like to have more information on the website that could connect curious people to the other Kala projects, like to the dictionary, to the encyclopedia, so that everything can kind of come together and interconnect with a lot of different Kala community knowledge. So that is my example of my attempt, which is still very much a work in progress, of distilling the theoretical knowledge of my dissertation into something that I hope is more relevant and more accessible. So with that, I will say, Te andandi birago do tome. Thank you very much, and thank you for listening.